What's the matter? Are you afraid of vampires? No need to worry. I'm not staying for dinner. I'm here to guide you through a brief history of vampires, illustrating how our image has changed from a shambling corpse to the dapper gentleman you see before you. Vampires are nearly as old as you humans. Stories about us revenants appear in cultures extending as far back as prehistoric times. But we weren't called vampires back then, and most of us did not look the way we imagine vampires today. Far from it. For example, the Mesopotamian Lamashtu was a creature with the head of a lion and the body of a donkey, and the ancient Greek striges were simply described as bloodthirsty birds. Others were even stranger. The Philippine Manananggal would sever her upper torso and sprout huge bat-like wings to fly. The Malaysian Penanggalan was a flying female head with dangling entrails. And the Australian Yaramayahu was a little red guy with a big head, a large mouth, and bloodsuckers on his hands and feet. Oh, and let's not forget the Caribbean's Sukoyant, the West African Obaifo, and the Mexican Tlahelpoch. Charming, aren't they? Though they may look vastly different, all of these beings have one common characteristic. They sustain themselves by consuming the life force of a living creature. This shared trait is what defines a vampire. All the other attributes change with the tides. So, how do we arrive at the reanimated fellow you see before you? Our modern ideal emerges in 18th century Eastern Europe, with a dramatic increase of vampire superstitions. Stories of blood-sucking shadowy creatures become nightly bedside terrors. And popular folklore, like the Mulu among the Romani people, and the Lugat in Albania provide the most common vampire traits known today, such as vampires being undead and nocturnal and shape-shifting. You see, Eastern Europe in the 18th century was a pretty grim place, with many deaths occurring from unknown diseases and plagues. Without medical explanations, people searched for supernatural causes, and found what looked like evidence in the corpses of the victims. When villagers dug up bodies to discern the cause of the mysterious deaths, they would often find the cadavers looking very much alive. Longer hair and fingernails, bloated bellies, and blood at the corners of mouths. Clearly, these people were not really dead. They were vampires, and they had been leaving their graves to feast on the living. The terrified villagers would quickly enact a ritual to kill the undead. The practices varied across the region, but usually included beheadings, burnings, and staking the body to the coffin to prevent it from getting up. Grisly stuff. But what the villagers interpreted as unholy reanimation were actually normal symptoms of death. When a body decomposes, the skin dehydrates, causing the hair and fingernails to extend. Bacteria in the stomach creates gases that fill the belly, which force out blood and matter through the mouth. Unfortunately, this science was not yet known, so the villagers kept digging. In fact, so many bodies were dug up that the Empress of Austria sent her physician around to disprove the vampire stories. And she even established a law prohibiting grave tampering. Still, even after the vampire hunts had died down, the stories and legends survived in local superstition. This led to works of literature such as Polidori's The Vampire, the Gothic novel Carmilla, and, most famously, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Although Stoker incorporated historical material like Elizabeth Bathory's virgin bloodbaths and the brutal executions of Vlad Dracul, It was these local myths that inspired the main elements of his story. The Transylvanian setting, using garlic to defend oneself, and the staking of the heart. While these attributes are certainly familiar to us, elements he invented himself have also lasted over the years. Fear of crucifixes, weakness in sunlight, and the vampire's inability to see their reflection. By inventing new traits, Stoker perfectly enacted the age-old tradition of elaborating upon and expanding the myth of vampires. As we saw when we met my relatives, a huge variety of creatures stalked the night before Dracula. And many more will continue to creep through our nightmares. Yet, so long as they subsist off of a living being's life force, they are part of my tribe. Even sparkling vampires can be included. After all, it's the continued storytelling and reimagining of the vampire legend that allows us to truly live forever.
Flying through the night, I watch over this world. A silent guardian, a watchful protector, a dark knight. Okay, fine, so I'm not Batman. I'm just a bat. But like Batman, I'm often misunderstood. People think I'm scary, strange, and dangerous. If they only knew my story, though, I'd be cheered as a hero. When people think of bats, many think of vampires who want to suck their blood. But the truth is that out of over 1,200 bat species, only 3 are vampire bats. Out of these 3, only 1 prefers the blood of mammals. And even these bats mostly feed on cattle. Maybe that still doesn't seem so great, but vampire bats can be a great help to humans. A chemical known as desmatoplase found in vampire bat saliva helps break down blood clots and is being tested by recovering stroke victims. Of the remaining 1,000+ species of bats, about 70% feed on insects. These bats help control the real vampires, mosquitoes, whose nasty bites are not just annoying, but spread diseases like West Nile virus. A single little brown bat can eat 1,000 insects every hour, and a colony of Mexican free-tailed bats can eat several tons of moths in just one night. In the United States alone, bats provide an estimated $3.7 billion worth of free pest control for farmers, which benefits everyone who eats the foods that they grow. Fruit bats, also called megabats because of their large size, are important for the role they play in plant pollination. By traveling between flowers while feeding on nectar and fruits, these bats transport the pollen and seeds that help plants reproduce. In Southeast Asia, for example, the cave nectar bat is the only pollinator of the durian fruit. Other bats pollinate peaches, bananas, and the agave plants that tequila is made from. Without them, many of our food plants would be unable to produce the tasty fruits we enjoy. As heroes of the ecosystem, bats have their own unique utility belts. Bats have been a source of inspiration for the design of flying robots, and even an energy-efficient spy plane, as they are the only mammal capable of true powered flight. Echolocation, a type of biological sonar, is also used by bats as a way to navigate and find prey in the dark. Although there's a common misconception that bats are blind, in truth, all species of bats have sight, and some have even adapted large eyes to see better in dim lighting. Many people worry about getting infected by bats, and like any other animals, bats can carry diseases like rabies. In reality, though, less than 0.5% of all bats carry this virus. That's about the same odds as getting the same result on a coin flip 8 times in a row. The perception that bats are often diseased may come from the fact that sick bats, who may show unusual behavior, emerge during the daytime, or be unable to fly, are more likely to be encountered by people. So a good way to protect yourself is to protect bats as well, keeping them healthy, protecting their habitats, and reducing their risk of transmitting disease. In North America, bats are threatened by a devastating sickness called white nose syndrome. This fungal infection causes bats to wake up while hibernating during the winter. Unable to find food, they expend large amounts of energy and eventually starve to death. White nose syndrome has wiped out entire caves full of bats, with a mortality rate that can exceed 90%. Climate change and habitat destruction also pose serious threats to bat populations. For example, in January 2014, a record heat wave in Australia caused over 100,000 bats to die from heat exhaustion. Some people just want to watch the world burn, and bats all over the world are threatened by damage to the places that we call home, including mangrove swamps, old-growth forests, and of course, bat caves. So even though I'm the hero of the story, I do need to be saved. And now that you know the true story about us bats, you can learn how to protect such heroic animals. Install a properly designed bat box, one of the easiest ways to provide shelter for bats. Discourage the use of pesticides, which can harm bats when we try to feed on the insects you want to get rid of in the first place. Avoid going into caves where you might disturb hibernating bats, and always decontaminate your gear after visiting a cave. If you have unwanted bats living in an attic or barn, contact your local government to safely and humanely relocate us. And if you come across a bat, do not attempt to handle it, but instead call animal control. Batman might want to keep his identity secret, but a great way to help real bats is by continuing to learn about them and spreading the truth that they are real heroes, even if their good deeds are often unseen.